Ember is back, and today we're going to be talking about the hardest area in each Souls game from Demon Souls all the way to Elden Ring. And not all of these are difficult in a good way. And whoever called me the Watch Mojo of Soulsborne games, I hate you. But anyway, starting with Demon Souls, I think I gotta go with 5-2, the Swamp of Sorrow. I'll give an honorable mention to the Ritual Path as well, but I feel like I can't put anything other than the Swamp of Sorrow in this spot. This game is a bit different since you can progress the Archstones in any order you choose, but I always find myself leaving this one for last and still struggling with it. It's the OG Poison Swamp with narrow pathways, obnoxious enemies, pretty much everything that makes these games difficult for the wrong reasons. There's a ton to explore and discover here, but obviously the swamp makes it pretty difficult, especially with multiple enemies waiting for you on every piece of land. I think what makes this area the most difficult is just the amount of enemies around. It's already hard enough to navigate the swamp due to how dark it is, but having depraved ones jump on top of you every 5 seconds can get a little bit distracting. Sorry, speaking of that, you're probably already distracted because I forgot to put a video of me driving around in GTA below this with a voiceover of Andrew Tate. Nowadays, this area is no more than a sprint to the boss for me, but since there's no other checkpoints here, this run can be pretty brutal. Especially since the Dirty Colossus isn't as much of a pushover as the Leechmonger, but it's still not too hard. All we can hope now is that Elden Ring's DLC will give us the ultimate poison swamp to put all others to shame. And since Elden Ring's DLC just got announced, let me show you how to get access to it early. When Elden Ring first came out, a bunch of my friends and I got to play the game 20 hours earlier than everyone else just because we used a VPN. I actually wish I had started my YouTube channel by then because I would have been able to post videos before everyone else. But I will be getting the DLC early with the help of today's sponsor, Surfshark VPN. With a VPN, you can change your location to the furthest time zone, unlocking any game or DLC early for you to play before everyone else. You can also get access to games and shows that aren't available in your region. I don't know if you've checked Netflix in different countries before, but they have all kinds of different shows than they do here in the US, but now you don't even have to leave your house to get access to them. It also protects your data, so when the guy in game chat says he has your IP address, you won't have to take back everything you said about his mom. Purchasing a 24-month VPN plan is seriously one of the best deals you can find right now. Surfshark has a great offer, 3 months extra and 83% off. Just scan the QR code on the screen or click the link in the description and use my promo code EMBER. Try it out for yourself and get an incredible VPN for all of your devices with 24/7 support. And by the way, it has a 30-day money-back guarantee, so what are you waiting for? Get Surfshark VPN today. Moving on to Dark Souls, this one is tough because there are a lot of difficult areas and it kind of depends when you decide to go where. Like the Catacombs, for example, I think is one of the hardest, but obviously you can go later to make it a little bit easier for yourself. But the one I think is the hardest and most annoying in this game has to be the Duke's Archives. For whatever reason, it feels like every enemy is 4 times as difficult in this area, and I think the sudden jump is what makes it feel so challenging. On top of that, there are so many archers in this area, it makes the knights in Anor Londo feel like a tutorial. Everything here does a ton of damage, so it can get overwhelming pretty quickly with how many enemies are around. Running around in this maze, pulling levers and taking elevators while casters spam magic at you gets pretty stressful, especially if you don't know where to go. I can't tell if this level was rushed or if the difficulty was intentional, because I still think the level design is pretty good, it's just the amount of enemies around. This was probably the biggest slap in the face this game gave me, aside from maybe the Tomb of Giants, but I think with how big this area is, I can confidently give it this spot. But I will say the Crystal Cave right after wasn't really a walk in the park either. The Duke's Archives is probably the most frustrating area in this game though, and I still think it's the hardest overall and definitely takes me the most attempts to get through out of any area in Dark Souls. Next up, we have Dark Souls 2. While I can't deny the Frigid Outskirts is likely the hardest area in this game, I'm so sick of talking about it and I'm sure you're all tired of hearing it, so let's go with the Dragon Shrine. There are a lot of areas in Dark Souls 2 that could have taken this spot, but I think the Dragon Shrine is one of the hardest just because of these damn knights. I feel like I have to mention the Iron Passage as well, but I honestly only think of this area as a boss run, not really an actual location. The Iron Keep is pretty close for me as well, just due to the amount of enemies stuffed in this area, but they aren't as challenging as the ones in the Dragon Shrine. I can't even count the amount of tries this area took me in my first playthrough, but all I know is by the time I made it through, most of the enemies had despawned completely. I really love this area though, and I'm a huge fan of the aesthetic. I'm not sure if it's difficult for the right reasons, since it kind of just feels like they put a tough enemy in your way every 5 feet, but most of the time I actually found them pretty enjoyable to fight, so I'm not too mad about it. But we all know the one enemy that single-handedly put this area as the hardest, and that would be the Drake Keeper with the mace, the hammer, whatever you want to call it. The hitboxes here make you feel like your dodges don't even work, and every time you think this guy is done attacking, he acts like DJ Khaled.
Another one.
After that, you reach a giant staircase with so many enemies that if you decide to aggro one, just don't. It also has the ancient dragon, which we all know is fairly ridiculous. I didn't have as much trouble with it as most people, but I'm not gonna say it wasn't challenging. And bullshit. Moving on to Bloodborne, honestly, this one was no contest for me. The hardest area in this game is without a doubt the fishing hamlet. But luckily, it's still a pretty great area in my opinion. Also, by the way, I'm giving away the poster I got from the Elden Ring Jazz Show for 100k subs, so make sure you're subscribed for a chance to win. The atmosphere of the fishing hamlet is unlike anything FromSoft has ever done before and has such a distinct feel to it, but I can't help but feel terrified every time I play this level. I think we all know about the infamous shark gank in the well here. These two enemies probably took me more tries than any boss in this game, and I remember thinking they were so hard I had to be doing something wrong. But other than that, there's tons of verticality, tons of difficult enemies, and of course, one of the hardest bosses in the series, the Orphan of Cause. The challenge really ramps up as soon as you start the DLC in this game, and I think all the areas in it are pretty tough, but I don't think anything felt as intimidating as the fishing hamlet. This is probably the best example of a solid challenge while still creating a quality area that's enjoyable and has places to explore. Aside from the sharks, those damn fish dogs are probably the most annoying enemy in this area, and it feels like they come out of nowhere. Even being decently over leveled, I still had a ton of trouble with this level, and it had me looking things up to see if I was even supposed to be there yet. I haven't played the fishing hamlet in New Game Plus yet, but I'm terrified to see how that goes. Next up, we have Dark Souls 3. This one was another no-brainer as the difficulty clearly went up here as well. We have the Ringed City. They really waste no time introducing you to the obstacles you'll have to overcome, with the ghost archers doing probably the most damage I've ever seen in this game. The judicators that summon them are absolute tanks as well, and while I don't like to recommend cheesing things, cheese them. Just do it. It's not worth it. On the bright side, this is one of my favorite areas in the series with its beautiful scenery, vibrant colors, and creative enemies. I love fighting the knights here. They're insanely difficult even with a high level character, but these are some of my favorite enemies and I always enjoy a good farm with these guys. There are definitely some things that feel frustrating just for the sake of difficulty here, but for the most part, I think they did a great job. There's tons of items and secrets to find in the Ring City, and I think this is one of my favorite places to explore. It also goes without saying that this has two of the greatest bosses FromSoft has ever created, Half-Light and, no, I'm just kidding, Midir and Gale. Having a quick fight with Midir and then meeting him again in a secret area as an optional boss was an awesome addition, and I think he's probably the most well-executed dragon fight FromSoft has done to date. He's also at least top 3 in terms of boss difficulty in the series for me. And Gale, obviously, I ride this dude enough already, but what a cinematic fight, what a challenge, and what a way to end the Dark Souls trilogy. The Ring City is one of my favorite areas in the series and definitely gets my vote for the hardest area in Dark Souls 3. Moving on to Sekiro, I want to say the Fountainhead Palace, but I think I'm gonna go with the late game Ashina Castle. This place has some of the toughest enemies in the game, and they're scattered all over the place in really inconvenient areas. Enemies that used to be mini bosses are now just regular enemies. Welcome to FromSoft games. The good thing is you've already been here, so you should know the layout well enough to get through it without much trouble. I think this is a really cool moment in the game, but they definitely didn't take it easy on us. With the mini bosses becoming normal enemies, it's really bold for them to assume I got good enough to actually fight them. This area is packed with new things to find, and I think they did a great job giving this location the late game intensity that we expect from these titles. Not to mention, it also has the Demon of Hatred, which is my vote for the hardest boss in Sekiro. This boss took me so many tries, and I still have trouble fighting it when I play through this game again. Fountainhead Palace is a close second here, obviously one of the most visually stunning areas in this game, but this one was a huge roadblock in my first playthrough. I don't know if it's just me, but the Palace Nobles freak me out, and with how many are scattered around this place, it can get pretty stressful. The bow enemies on the roof are pretty tough to take down as well, but if you utilize your stealth here, you shouldn't have too much trouble. Fountainhead has so much to do, finding the underwater headless, the quest with the great carp. This area is packed with secrets, and it's definitely one of my favorites in this game. And last, but certainly not least, we have Elden Ring. There's a few areas that are close, but I think it's tough to deny the hardest area in this game is definitely Miquella's Haligtree. This one really disappointed me because I was super excited to get here in my first playthrough, but I didn't realize how obnoxious everything was gonna be. It sucks because this area is really cool and unique looking, but the enemies do way more damage, and if you haven't rolled off the edge at least once, you're probably lying. And the ants, man, screw these ants. I actually think some of the tougher enemies are pretty fun to fight here though, and there's a pretty good variety of them. I always expect this area to be more fun than it it is, and it's pretty damn confusing your first time through it. Loretta's pretty fun though. I actually think she's one of the more underrated bosses in Elden Ring, even if she is a bit too easy, but I think it would have been cooler if we could have used Torrent. I also have to touch on Millennia, of course. I think she's a great boss and a fun challenge. I love when FromSoft adds an optional boss at the end of the game and cranks the difficulty up all the way. I never understood how she was that controversial. Like, she's optional, just don't fight her. But the only locations I think could rival the Halleck Tree are Crumbling Farum Azula and the Consecrated Snowfield, but they had a bit more open space and they didn't have Millennia, so I had to give it this spot. Also, everyone's starting to get really sick of my outros, so I'll just